Hello and welcome back to Poison Break, Toxic Tales at Work. Today I want to tell you about a personal experience again, something that I had to go through. You know, that moment when you ask a very normal question at work and somehow it turns into a whole production you never signed up for, because that's exactly what happened to me. I was still pretty new in the role, maybe a couple of weeks in, and I was about to call a customer. Nothing dramatic. I just wanted a double check what exactly I should say in that situation. So I went to my highly narcissistic manager, by the way, and asked a very simple question. And instead of just answering it, she goes, "Okay, let's do a role play. Why don't we do that?" And I remember this very specific pause in my brain where I thought, wait, what? She said, "Just imagine I'm the customer and you talk to me as if I'm the customer." And in my mind, I was like, I didn't ask for a workshop. I just needed one sentence, like a simple answer. But okay, I was new. I wanted to be cooperative. So I said yes. And then she says, "Pretend I'm the customer. Call me." Not suggest, not offer, instruct. It was an instruction. So now I'm sitting there internally already a little tense, hating unnatural moments like these anyway. Like, this was some kind of performance review moment when all I originally needed was quick guidance. And the weird part wasn't even the roleplay itself. It was the frequency, because this started happening a lot. Every time I had a question, every time I wanted clarification, every time I just needed a quick answer. And it turned into this whole controlled exercise where suddenly I was being observed, corrected, managed very closely. So she did this in an open office setting as well. Like, it just made it so much more uncomfortable that she also did that in an open office setting every now and then, or almost all the time. There was always this subtle audience. Even when no one was actively listening, it felt like they could, obviously. And at the time, I honestly couldn't fully name why it made me so uncomfortable. I just knew my body would tense up every time I had to ask her something. Looking back now, it wasn't really about support. It was about control. Also, the way she did it, like, I would ask her a question and she would just stare at me sometimes with her crazy eyes, make me feel stupid. And I was always like, was that a stupid question? Was that, I don't know. Because she also withheld information, which made me have to ask every little thing about every process, because she didn't provide me with the information so that I cannot do my job properly. And she needed to be involved in every single interaction I had, even the small ones. And that's one of those subtle workplace red flags that can be really hard to explain while you're in it. But once you've experienced it, you start to recognize the pattern. And I did some research, but I didn't really find anything exactly like that. Like, I didn't find anything about, managers, like toxic managers or narcissistic managers in particular, doing role plays with people. But this is also why I specifically wanted this episode to be about that, because that's one specific thing that my manager did that made me feel extremely stupid, small, incompetent, whatever, even though I had many years of experience in that field already. But it just gave me a lot of insecurity, and it made working with her extremely uncomfortable. And I just wondered if other narcissistic managers or just toxic managers in general also do that, to kind of, it's like a power move almost. So here's the thing. Roleplay itself, like in itself, is not bad. In healthy leadership, it can actually be useful, like a useful coaching tool. It can build confidence, it can prepare you, it can create psychological safety when it's collaborative. But that's the key difference. In healthy leadership, it feels supportive. In unhealthy leadership, it feels performative. And I think you can feel the difference in the moment 100%. When you look at this dynamic through the lens of narcissistic leadership patterns, it starts to make more sense, because narcissistic leaders often have a very fragile internal sense of self-worth. Even if they appear extremely confident on the outside, their authority becomes their stabilizer. So their position becomes their identity, and control becomes their emotional regulation tool. So why turn a simple question into a role play? Power. Power is almost always the answer if you ask why questions with a narcissistic manager, leader, colleague, whatever. It's always power. That's all they want at the end of the day. And if every small interaction has to go through them, they remain the gatekeeper. You don't just get information, you get it mediated through their authority. Control is also important to them. By making you perform, they subtly position themselves as evaluator. You're no longer just asking for guidance, you're being assessed. Also, superiority comes into play. Role plays create a teacher-student dynamic. They're the expert. You're the one who needs correction. And if this happens constantly, it reinforces hierarchy where they are always above you. So why could they turn a simple question to a role play as well? It's uncertainty. If you never know whether a simple question will turn into a public performance, you start self-monitoring, you hesitate, you overthink, and that subtle anxiety keeps you slightly off balance. And that's what they want. They don't want you to be confident, secure in what you're doing. They want you to be off balance all the time. And there's something else that's important. A public settings amplify this. Doing it in an open office adds an invisible audience. Even if nobody is actively watching, the possibility is enough. It raises the stakes, it creates pressure, and pressure increases dependency because now you want to avoid doing it wrong. Over time, something shifts. You stop asking spontaneous questions, you start preparing excessively, you try to anticipate their reaction, you adapt your tone, your body braces before conversations, and that even more when you, for example, like I did, grew up with a narcissistic parent or an emotionally unavailable parent, whatever. This is even stronger, I would say. Or you try to adapt even more. And that's how control embeds itself quietly. Not through screaming or obvious abuse. I mean, obviously this happens, unfortunately, as well, like very obvious abuse, but through constant micromanagement disguised as coaching. And again, it's subtle. That's why it's confusing, because technically they're helping, technically they're training you, or they're invested, but the emotional experience tells a completely different story. Support feels expanding, and control feels contracting. Support makes you more autonomous over time, but control keeps you dependent, and that's what they want. They want you to be dependent on them. And for me, the biggest giveaway, your nervous system, how you react, how you feel in those moments. If your body tenses every time you approach someone for a clarification, that's data. If you feel small instead of supported, if you feel like you're constantly being watched rather than guided, 100%. That's a very, very big giveaway. And I would definitely watch out for that. So my question to you, have you ever had a manager who turned simple questions into performances, or who needed to insert themselves into everything, who couldn't just let you do something independently, who framed control as mentorship? If yes, you already know the feeling. And maybe the most important thing here to say is it wasn't you being too sensitive or too unprofessional. It definitely wasn't you needing that many role plays. Definitely not. I'm just interested if other people also experience that, because I can imagine that maybe it could be a very common move, but I'm not 100% sure. I assume that other narcissistic leaders or managers also do that. Maybe even colleagues who train you, for example. So sometimes what looks like training is actually someone protecting their ego. And once you see that pattern, you cannot unsee it. So if you have experienced something like that, you know exactly what I've been talking about. If you find similarities in what I just talked about and what you are experiencing right now, or maybe it makes sense to you now why they're doing it. And it was just a horrible time, and I hated every single one of those role plays. But at one point, like I remember after a few of them, I was just saying to her that I don't like theoretical stuff, like I like the practical stuff more, and I cannot really imagine you being that person right now. Like I even did stuff like that. So sometimes I made her feel stupid. I was just done with those role plays. It was, I didn't even want to ask her a question anymore. It was just absolutely uncomfortable. So thank you for listening today. I hope you could take away something from this episode. I would love if you joined me in my next episode. And as every time, stay strong. You got this. You're not alone. And I will speak to you in the next one. Bye.